Hello, I'm Terry Miller, and I'm an advanced practice registered nurse, certified nurse practitioner. I have taken an interest in Ohio nursing rules for the past several years, and I've also been involved in legislative efforts such as opponent testimony, meeting with representatives, and communicating with the employees of the Board of Nursing. The desired outcome of this continuing education is for you as the learner to have an understanding of the newly adopted Ohio Board of Nursing rules, and to also refamiliarize yourself with the rules that have been in existence. I would also like for you to be aware of current legislation as well as the process. So let's get started. First, we all need to be aware of the difference between a contact hour and a continuing education unit. In Ohio, we only use the term contact hour. One contact hour is 60 minutes of continuing education. In Ohio, we do not use the term continuing education units. Some states use those. However, a continuing education unit is 10 hours of instruction. So make sure that you look at your certificate you received after your education for the term contact hours. Obviously, there is a big difference between the two. Category A is continuing education that is directly related to the Ohio Nurse Practice Act and the administrative rules of the Ohio Board of Nursing. As nurses, we are required to have one continuing education of Category A. This particular CE must be approved by an Ohio Board of Nursing approver or offered by the Ohio Board of Nursing approved provider unit that is headquartered in the state of Ohio. Therefore, you would not be able to obtain this contact hour through a national conference in most instances. Please make sure that you check your certificate for Category A for the approval agency. For those of us who have a current Ohio registered nurse license, we will need 24 contact hours to renew our registered nurse license. These contact hours must be earned between the time of November the 1st, 2017 and October the 31st of 2019. If you renewed your license early when the applications came out in June or July of 2017, and then you attended some continuing education courses, and let's say you did those in August, you cannot use those August for this even though you didn't include those in the last renewal period. So basically anything after November 1st, anything before that went in the year prior. So when you're applying for your license, you're actually attesting that you have earned or that you will earn those 24 contact hours by November 1st. So in contrast to that, let's say that you renewed in June, but you only had 20 hours, but then you were planning on getting 4 additional hours in August. As long as you got those 4 additional contact hours, then that's okay. You just need to attest that by that October 31st of 2017 date that you had received those. And so that will go into effect this time for the November 1st to October 31st. So those are the 2 dates to remember. You need to look at your CE certificate and make sure that whatever contact hours you're including to make up to that 24 are within those 2 dates. So the bottom line is the start date for every CE is November 1st of an odd year. It's not the day that you applied to renew your license. So for continuing education, for the period immediately following licensure by exam, a nurse who holds an active license to practice nursing in Ohio is not required to complete any contact hours of CE for that first renewal. Now there is some confusion of what license by endorsement is. So, license of endorsement is the process of issuing a permanent license without further examination to a nurse from another jurisdiction or licensing authority after the determination is made that the applicant meets the same standard as those required of Ohio nurses. So there's different continuing education rules for the nurses that are applying for this. And so let's say that the nurse was living in Pennsylvania and now the nurse moved to Ohio. So you would apply for an Ohio license, but then if the applicant met the standards for Ohio through taking everything from Pennsylvania, you wouldn't have to take another NCLEX exam. So therefore you would be given a license by endorsement. So you don't have to take the Ohio NCLEX, you would just have this license by endorsement. And so that's the way it is, especially for those people who live on the border. They can have a license in different areas without actually taking the NCLEX in each area. A nurse who's been licensed by endorsement in Ohio for 1 year or less, so these are the people that came from another state, must complete 12 contact hours of continuing education. And then a nurse who has been licensed by endorsement in Ohio for more than 1 year must complete 24 contact hours of continuing education. So now let's talk a little bit about what counts for a CE or continuing education. So the most popular category of a CE is an activity that's been approved by the Ohio Board of Nursing approver or provided by an approved provider unit. So the Board of Nursing website includes those that are Ohio Board of Nursing providers. However, there are too many approved provider units to include. So just make sure that your certificate has an approved provider name and that number on it. With the exception of Category A, you may also earn your CE through another jurisdiction. For example, if you attend a national conference and the CE was awarded in Hawaii, those CEs would count towards your renewal. You may also earn your CE through nationally recognized accreditation systems. Those would include the American Nurses Credentialing Center, or ANCC, the Accreditation Council for Continuing Medical Education, or ACCME, or the International Association for Continuing Education and Training, which is IACET. Academic credit also counts towards CE as long as the course is through an accredited educational institution. I believe now that all of the educational institutions are on semester hours, so the conversion rate for them is 1 credit hour a semester system equals 15 contact hours of CE. An independent study may also be used for CE, and so that's an example of what this one is. But keep in mind that the contact hours still need to be awarded by an approver. So independent studies are self-paced learning. However, they must also include an evaluation and feedback to the learner. Feedback to the learner is commonly done through a post-quiz. So therefore, like I said, this module is an example of an independent study. There's a module to view, an evaluation to complete, and a quiz to pass. Once all of those have been completed, the certificate would then be presented. Also, a CE may be planned by an interprofessional team with members of 2 or more different professions. An example would be a presentation that included both nursing and social work on the planning committee. Frequently, nurses will ask if they're able to use continuing education activities from other healthcare professions, and the answer is yes. Examples include those approved by the State of Ohio Medical Board, the State of Ohio Board of Pharmacy, the State Board of Psychology, and the Counselor, Social Worker, and Marriage and Therapist Board. One of the new areas in which we can now earn continuing education is through volunteering. If the applicant provides healthcare services to an indigent and uninsured person without compensation, and the healthcare services provided are in the practice of nursing as a registered nurse, the applicant then can count 1 hour of CE for each 60 minutes of volunteer work with a maximum of 8 hours during that renewal period. Therefore, if you go on a mission trip and you care for the indigent and underserved without compensation, you may count these hours if you performed health services. However, let's say you went on a mission trip to help build homes or to rebuild a church. Those hours would not qualify. For the required documentation for the volunteer hours, you will need to provide a signed statement from a person at the healthcare facility or the location where the healthcare services were performed, indicating the date and time the healthcare services were performed, that the recipient was indigent and uninsured, and that the licensee provided services as a volunteer without compensation. For those of you that present in a course in which contact hours were awarded, you may use those contact hours as your own. If you're audited by the Board of Nursing, as the presenter, you will need to supply the original date of the activity, the length of the presentation, the title of the activity, the authorized Ohio Board of Nursing approver number, or the name of the authorized approver if not the Ohio Board of Nursing, the name of the provider, the outcomes for the activity, and the number of contact hours awarded for the presenter's presentation. So in my opinion, the easiest thing would be to keep a certificate of completion from the original date of the activity. However, there are some of the required items that are not generally included on your certificate. Therefore, you would need to add the original date of the activity. So if you presented this more than once, you just need that original date. The length of the presentation also needs to be included. And this is generally going to be different than the number of contact hours, because the contact hours of 60, let's say, for the hour, may include time for completion of the evaluation, quizzes, questions, etc. But the actual length of the presentation may have only been 45 minutes. The name of the provider, the outcomes for the activity. So now that we know what qualifies for continuing education, what does not qualify for continuing education? So repetition of any educational activity with identical content and course outcomes within a single reporting period. So what that means, for example, this module is right now being, you're seeing this as an independent study, but it's also being given as a live presentation. So although they have two different approver numbers, the content and the outcomes are the same. Therefore, you can only count this once during that single reporting period. Self-directed learning, such as reading texts or journal articles that have not been approved as an independent study or awarded contact hours by an accredited or approved provider or provider unit, may not qualify. Participation in clinical practice or research that is not part of a CE activity also would not be included. You also may not include professional development activities or professional meetings like attending a Board of Nursing meeting or attending an Ohio Nurses Association members meeting. You may only include the parts that were for education and not that entire time that you attended. Community service may not be included. However, volunteer practice with the limitations we already discussed may be included. If you're in disciplinary action within the Board of Nursing and you're ordered to obtain additional continuing education in a certain area, you may not use those hours towards your 24 for the renewal period. Membership in a professional organization also does not count in itself for continuing education. However, many times the organization will offer free contact hours with your paid membership. The Ohio Nurses Association offers them for free, as well as the American Association of Nurse Practitioners. The Board of Nursing also allows for a one-time CE waiver that you can use. If you're renewing in July of 2019 and you realize that you have only earned 6 contact hours since November 1st of 2017, when you complete the application for your nursing license renewal, you can request the continuing education waiver. However, please keep in mind that this is a one and done for your entire career, And once it is requested on the application, you cannot withdraw that request. Therefore, if you did renew early in July of 2019, and in August you decide to attend a conference, and now you have earned the entire 24 contact hours. So in a month you went from having 6 to the whole 24. And this was prior to the October 31st, 2019 deadline. Unfortunately, you're out of luck. Keep in mind that when you apply for your nursing license, you are attesting that you will have the 24 contact hours by October 31st of 2019. It doesn't necessarily say that you have completed all of them at the time of that renewal. But then on the flip side, if you attested that you will have or have the full 24 hours and you didn't quite get them all and you're audited, there's likely going to be consequences. If you're audited, keep in mind that you need to keep your CE documentation for a total of 6 years. Acceptable CE documents must contain your name, the title of the program, the date of the program completion, the number of contact hours, the Ohio Board of Nursing approver name and number, or the name of the provider and the name of the authorized approver, or the name of the approval body. If it's for academic credit, you need to have a school transcript or grade report, and it must include your name, the name of the school, and the dates you attended, as well as the credit hours awarded. But keep in mind that transcript may be an unofficial transcript. So like I said, make sure that you're keeping all of these for 6 years. For those of us who are advanced practice registered nurses, the CE requirements for the renewal of 2019 gave us a big break. And that's because of Rule 4723-8-10 B3 of the OAC, which states, for the first period of renewal immediately following the initial issuance of the Advanced Practice Registered Nurse license, a licensee is not required to complete any contact hours of CE. So therefore, APRNs only need the 24 hours required for the RN license for that 2019 renewal. But keep in mind that you still have the requirements for your certification through ANCC, AANP, or whatever other certifying agency that you get your certificate through. So this is a big deal for most of us. Keep in mind you will need that 1 hour of Ohio rule and law, and that's part of these 24 hours, but you will not need those pharmacology hours or the additional APRN hours. So to break it down, November 1st, 2019 to October 31st of 2021. So this will be for the 2021 renewal, not for the 2019, but the 2021 renewal. All the APRNs will need 24 RN hours, which includes that one category A, which is the law and rule. And they will also need 24 hours of APRN hours, and those 24 include 12 pharmacology hours. So in total, APRNs will need 48 contact hours. We're going to change gears a little bit now and talk about disciplinary actions, because I think many nurses appear to be a little overly concerned that they're going to lose their license for just about anything and everything. So I just want to take a minute to equate the nursing license with your driver's license. So let's say you're driving down the road at 45 miles an hour in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. Unfortunately, you're pulled over by a nice policeman with the radar. You explain to him that this is your first offense, you're sorry, and you're not going to let it happen again. Yes, you broke the law. You're likely going to receive a fine. However, it's doubtful that you're going to lose your driver's license over this first offense of speeding. Now let's say that you're driving very erratically at 70 miles per hour in the same 35-mile-an-hour zone, and there's an unfortunate outcome to a pedestrian that was walking across the street. The blue lights and the siren are in your rearview mirror. You pull over, and the police officer is not smiling. In this case, a bad outcome occurred from a direct result of you breaking the law, and therefore you may likely be standing in front of a judge with an attorney to explain yourself. The judge will probably suspend your driver's license, order you to pay a fine, and possibly mandate education, like some sort of a driving course. So this could be compared to the Board of Nursing. If you commit what is perceived to be a minor offense, you may pay a fine and/or you may get some continuing education to complete. However, if there is a bad patient outcome while you are not following the law or Nurse Practice Act, then there will be additional consequences. It is very possible that you will be then standing in front of the Board of Nursing, and if you are so inclined with an attorney, to explain your case. The board will likely suspend your license for a period of time, order you again to pay a fine, or order you to complete additional education. If you comply with their orders and you completed the probationary period, there is a chance that you will have your nursing license reinstated. According to the Board of Nursing Annual Report, in 2017, there were 8,710 complaints received at the Board of Nursing. So in 1 year, close to 8,800 complaints. This includes registered nurses, licensed practical nurses, dialysis technicians, medication assistants, as well as community health workers. In total, the Board of Nursing regulates close to 30,000 licenses in 2017. The actual number was 297,366. So if you divide that out by that 8710, it comes out to less than 3% of licenses. Also, keep in mind that complaints can come to the board from absolutely anywhere. They can receive a complaint from one of your patients, from a family member of a patient, from an employer, a coworker, or from a law enforcement agency. Just about anyone can contact the Board of Nursing with a complaint. Of these 8,710 complaints, there were 718 actions taken in another state or jurisdiction. This could be a person that was licensed as a nurse in another state and they're also licensed in Ohio. Action was taken against them in the other state, and now Ohio is being notified to possibly take action as well. If you have criminal charges, either related to or unrelated to nursing, these issues will also be reviewed. One case I reviewed was a person that broke into the home whilst another person was inside. That person inside filed charges. It was later discovered it was the home of her boyfriend, and at the time of the break-in, the couple was spatting and she was just trying to get in to get her things. By the end of the investigation, she was once again living in the home with him. The issues with drugs and alcohol are a pretty large category. The board supports and contributes to the work of the Governor's Cabinet Opiate Action Team, or GCOTE, and they also collaborate with the State of Ohio Board of Pharmacy to identify and to investigate prescribers, to determine abusive prescribing patterns, and to take disciplinary actions as needed. I have heard nurses ask why the rules are so explicit in providing a definition for licensed nurse and also including title protection in the rules. Well, it's because people actually do imposter nurses. In 2017, the Board of Nursing received 29 complaints for this. Practice issues are over 1,000. However, keep in mind that most nurses do practice with due diligence to the law and the Nurse Practice Act. Keep in mind that this number of 1,000 plus refers to all licensees and not just the registered nurses. So I was a big Bewitched fan, and sometimes I do act a little bit like Mrs. Kravitz, even though I call my sister the first Mrs. Kravitz and I was the second one from Bewitched. You can look at the disciplinary actions that has been taken against licensees. All of this information is all public record. So you first go to the Ohio Board of Nursing, ohio.org site. You click on Discipline and Compliance. That's on the left side. Then you scroll down to the next page for recent board actions. You can choose if you want to see these results in a PDF or an Excel file. You open one and you'll get a list of the licensees that has had disciplinary actions. So I've obviously blocked out the last name and the first name, but you can see the names would be attached and it will have their RN, CRNA. This person was an RN and a CRNA, and they have their license numbers. And then from this, you take the license number and you go back to that first page. You then click on Disciplinary Records Request, and that's going to take you to the next page where you'll get the Public Records Request page. Once you click on that, a new page is going to pop up and you can either search by name or by license number. You're going to go back to that Excel PDF file, put the information in, click the box that you're not a robot, and then you hit search. The case documents are then going to be viewable. Many of the disciplinary cases are from opioid diversion. In just a few cases I reviewed from March of 2018, the diversion issues included a nurse who left opiates in an unsecure locker, which included fentanyl and Ativan. Another case was a school nurse who was taking ADHD medications from her students because she felt that she needed an extra perk for the day, so she would just take the medication from the students' bottles, and when the students came to get their medication, she didn't give them anything. And then another nurse was disciplined for failure to document administration of a benzodiazepam on multiple occasions in a psychiatric ward. She said she kept it in her pocket for emergencies, but she never did return the benzos, nor did she document that it was wasted. Many nurses that I have talked to feel that if someone is caught using drugs, that person's automatically going to lose their license, but that is not the case. The Board of Nursing provides an alternate program for chemical dependency and practice intervention and improvement program. These are confidential programs offered to licensees in lieu of disciplinary action. The board has also collaborated with the Ohio Board of Pharmacy to identify and investigate prescribers to determine abusive prescribing practices, and they will take disciplinary action as needed. In the next few slides, I'm going to give you an example of what the Board of Nursing may order, and keep that in mind, it's what they may order in the case of diversion. So the licensee will go through an investigation, and then the order may come out that the licensee shall obey all federal, state, and local laws and all laws and rules governing the practice of nursing in Ohio. He or she will appear in person for interviews before the full board or its designated representative as requested by the board or the designee. They will request and submit a criminal records check from the FBI. They will ask for continuing education, that in this particular case it was 10 hours of substance abuse as well as 2 hours of Ohio nursing law and rules. And then keep in mind that these 10 hours, then the 2 actual additional hours will not count towards your 24-hour needed for license renewal. And all of these things, including the criminal background check, is at the cost of the licensee. The licensee will be asked to abstain completely from personal use or possession of drugs except for those prescribed, administered, or dispensed by another authorized person who has full knowledge of the nurse's history. They're instructed to abstain completely from the use of alcohol or any products containing alcohol. They'll need to complete a chemical dependency evaluation at their own expense, and provide the Board of Nursing with the documentation of such evaluation, and provide documentation of compliance with the treatment plan developed by the chemical dependency professional. Once all of that's been completed, then the licensee may then request reinstatement. A minimum of 6 months prior to requesting the reinstatement, the licensee will submit blood, breath, hair, or urine specimens for drug and/or alcohol analysis. They will use the daily call-in process, and the lab must be submitted on that day. So the daily call-in process is a process in which the licensee will receive a call or calls in every morning, and then the system will automatically let them know if they are required to go that day to submit their specimen. The licensee will provide a copy of the Board of Nursing order to the treating practitioners, and the licensee must request each practitioner directly mail to the Board of Nursing their name, address, phone number, cause for treatment. So let's say that this particular person is seeing a primary care for depression. Then that primary care will need to submit their name, address, phone number, and the cause for treatment. And that needs to come directly from that particular practitioner. If they're also going to see someone from orthopedics for lower back pain and they're being given medication, the orthopedic also needs to submit their name, address, phone number, and the cause for treatment. And then at any time the licensee is hospitalized, within 24 hours of release from hospitalization or medical treatment, they must notify the Board of Nursing of any medications and all the prescriptions that they've received. Also, when requesting reinstatement, the licensee must attend a minimum of 1 meeting per week of a support or peer group meeting approved by the Board of Nursing or a 12-step program. They also must provide documentation that they have attended. They also will need to submit multiple other documents that have been ordered for submission. Once the request for reinstatement has been accepted, the licensee will go into a probationary period. The suspension of the issue is stayed and is subject to probationary terms and restrictions for a minimum of 2 years. So during probation, the licensee must appear in person for interviews when requested, abstain completely from personal use or possession of drugs, abstain completely from alcohol, submit body fluid samples with a daily call-in, weekly meetings in the 12-step program, and submit practitioners and medications that they're receiving. Then prior to accepting any employment during this probationary period, they must provide the order to the potential new employer. So all of this is written out in an order of what all needs to be done and complied with, and that order needs to go to that potential new employer. And then the employer needs to submit a written reports within 30 days and quarterly to the Board of Nursing. There also may be mandated to take a nurse refresher course or an extensive orientation, which both need to be approved by the Board of Nursing. There's also going to be some practice restrictions during that probationary period. They may not practice for agencies providing home care in the patient's residence, for hospice care programs providing hospice care in the patient's residence. They may not work for staffing agencies or pools. You may not work as an independent provider where the nurse provides nursing care and is reimbursed for services from the state of Ohio through state agencies or agencies of the state. You may not work for an individual or group of individuals who directly engage to provide nursing service for fee, compensation, or other consideration, nor can you work as a volunteer. No management of nursing or nursing responsibilities, and you may not supervise or evaluate nursing practice. Only if you complied with all of these requirements and the Board of Nursing has determined that the nurse is able to practice nursing accordance to acceptable and prevailing standards of safe nursing care without board monitoring, then their license may be given back. At any period during which the nurse does not work in a position within the state of Ohio for which the licensee to practice nursing is required will not count toward fulfilling the probationary period. So what that means is that if you decide that you got into some trouble in Ohio and you're going to go work in Pennsylvania for 2 years to just wait out that 2-year probationary period, that 2 years doesn't count. It must be within the state of Ohio. So the next and final topic that I want to talk about is Ohio legislative efforts. And I just really want to compel everyone to figure out for yourself, what are you willing to fight for? So are you willing to fight for your nursing practice? Are you willing to fight for the rights of animals? Are you willing to fight for the rights of women, men, whatever that may be? But whatever's within yourself, see what is there to see what you in particular are willing to fight for. So how a bill becomes a law is a pretty long and tedious process. So initially the bill is introduced. And this bill, it can be introduced from either someone at the Senate or someone in the House of Representatives. But in this particular case, we'll just say that it was introduced in the House of Representatives. So if there's something that you really want changed that's currently a law, you really want this changed, then you would take your ideas, and the best thing really to do is to take the current law and have it printed out and then just mark changes through it of what you would like to see. And then you go to your representative that's, represents you in your area, or you can go to another person, it doesn't really matter. And you can ask them if they're willing to support this, and then they will agree. Then they take it to LSC, which is the Legislative Service Commission, and they will write it all up. They'll make sure that it doesn't interfere with any other laws. They'll make sure that the wording is correct, and then it's introduced to the House. Then the House of Representatives, as well as the Senate, all has separate committees. So there's like a Health and Human Services Committee. Let's use that for an example. So then this bill is given to a committee. So the chair of the committee will decide if they're going to accept this or not. And so if they decide to accept it, then there become committee hearings. So this is where people that are for your bill that you want changed, this change, the people that are for it come forward and they give a proponent testimony. And then people that are against it, that they don't want to see this change, also have an opportunity to come, and then they can make changes. And these hearings can go on. Then there needs to be, it needs to be discussed a minimum of so many times. I think it's 3 times that it needs to come up. And then they can take floor action. So the committee will then decide and take floor action where there's just a vote. And so let's say that there's 15 people on the Health and Human Services Committee. Those 15 representatives will then all vote. So if they vote and it's a yes, then it goes to the other house. So in this case, then it's going to go to the Senate. So in the Senate, then once again, it will be assigned to a committee. And once again, you will need to go back and do your proponent hearings again to the Senate. You'll need to do your opponent hearings to the Senate, and it needs to hit the floor so many times. Then again, there'll be some floor action to this. Let's say that the Senate said, we like this bill with the exception of this one line in here. Then they can pass it, but with amendments made. And if that's the case, then it needs to go back to the original House, back to that committee, and then they need to make a decision if they agree with these changes or not. If it passes without the amendments, then it goes to the bill goes to the governor. The governor has an option if he wants to pass it through or veto. And so if it's not vetoed, then the bill becomes a law 90 days after the governor signs it. Now keep in mind that this all has to occur within a legislative session, and a legislative session is 2 years. So it's from January 1st through the rest of that year to the next year in December 31st. So also keep in mind that while all of this is happening, the representatives also get winter breaks for the holidays, and they also have breaks for to be in their hometowns, because a lot of these, all of this is occurring in downtown Columbus, and some of these people are from Toledo, Cincinnati, wherever, and so they have time there. And people that are on the House and our senators, our representatives and our senators, a lot of them have other jobs. And so these other jobs may be a realtor, they might be a business person, might be a minister. I mean, they could be anybody. And so they may or may not understand what you're talking about. And they may or may not understand the issues that you have with whatever you're presenting. And so in those particular cases, it may take a little extra work. Actually, in most cases, it takes a lot of extra work to go to them, to get other people and to try and convince them and trying to make them understand exactly what you're trying to change. So this is why a lot of bills die on the floor. They can either die in the House of Representatives, they can die in the Senate. Their primary support person may decide that it's not worth it to keep moving this through, and so therefore it just times out. And so if your particular bill doesn't make it through in those 2 years, and it doesn't make it to the to the governor signing it, then it dies on the floor and you're done. But then the next year, for the next legislative session, you can come up with that same and try it all over again. And then it would be up to your sponsor from either the House or the Senate if they want to help you continue to move this through again or not. So some of the legislative updates, these are things that are occurring this legislative session, which actually this legislative session ends December 31st of this year of 2018. And then the new one will start back up later. And so there are many different House bills, and I'm only going to kind of mention some of these that include healthcare. However, you can always go to legislative.ohio.org and you can look to see what legislative ideas are there and what bills are there. And you can also, there's also a link that will tell you exactly what the status is. Now, a lot of times that's not updated immediately, and so there's a little bit of fall behind for it, but you'll see it there. And then you also see where they have the different committee reports, and they'll have what House bills or Senate bills that were actually discussed during each committee session. And then you can also find out what the upcoming is going to be, but they don't usually post those until like Monday, and the committee may be on that following Wednesday. And so if you want to go and listen to what's being said one way or the other, you're more than welcome to go, because they're all open sessions. If you're somebody that's going to want to testify, you do need to submit your testimony in advance to the committee chair, and that's all getting a little bit more complicated, but there is an opportunity for anyone to testify or to write a letter as opposed to just presenting it. You can write a letter, and that letter will be distributed to all the people on that committee. So House Bill 101 was to improve access to epinephrine, and this passed through the House and it was referred to the Senate. And this is to authorize pharmacists to dispense epinephrine pursuant to a physician-established protocol rather than a prescription. And so basically this is meant for pharmacists to be able to give out epinephrine as long as they have a contract with certain physicians. And so this is mostly for people that are likely to experience anaphylaxis in certain entities where allergens are capable of causing anaphylaxis. So things like a pharmacist being able to give it out at near a like where a camp, like a kids camp or something to that effect. House Bill 111 authorizes nurses to complete, is what it's supposed to say, mental health evaluations. And so this actually, as many people already know, this allowed clinical nurse specialists or certified nurse practitioners who are certified in psychiatric mental health to have an individual involuntary hospitalized for mental health treatment in an emergency. And so that actually passed. And so the 90 days, I can't remember when it started, but soon, if not already, then psychiatric nurse practitioners or specialists are going to be able to authorize and basically pink slip. House Bill 191 is the big registered nurse anesthetist bill, and it regards their practice. Basically, the CRNAs are requesting pretty much independent practice. And they were originally part of House Bill 216 from last legislative session, and then they pulled out and they have their own House bill now. And I'm really rooting for them. I really hope that this passes for them. So it will grant them the right to select and order anesthesia that's to be administered. They would be able to select, order, and administer other drugs during certain periods and for treatment conditions related to the administration of anesthesia. So right now, nurse anesthetist cannot, let's say that they are the people that are called to a code, they are not able to give an order to a nurse to give medication while they're trying to intubate or something. And so this kind of clears all of that up. And I really, like I said, hope this passes for them. House Bill 193 was referred to committee, and this prohibits penalizing an employee for not getting the flu vaccination. So as people that work in the healthcare field, most of us are required to get a flu shot. And so this prohibits an employer from being able to fire someone that's not willing to get that flu shot. However, it does also permit that employer to require that that employee comply with reasonable alternative actions. And so they may say something like, well, you don't have to get the flu shot. However, you do have to wear a mask during flu season. So it does give them some leeway, but you cannot penalize that employee if they chose not to get that vaccination. House Bill 456 prohibits requiring nurses to work overtime. There was quite a bit, and there's online on the legislative site. There was also they had some very compelling proponent testimony to this. So I'm not sure if this one's going to pass because it only has until December of 2018 to do so, and it needs to go through both. But I think that if we don't see this pass this time, I think that it will definitely make its way back to the next legislative session. Senate Bill 55 specifies the rights of nurses, and this has a lot to do with the staffing of nurses and about posting staffing on the units. It's mostly for inpatient units, I would imagine, but and it's that they need to post that in a public place so that everybody can see on a shift-to-shift basis what kind of staffing that unit has. And so there's quite a bit to that one. Senate Bill 259 revised the physician assistant practice laws, and that's just because House Bill 216 that we had last year for the advanced practice registered nurses didn't include physician assistants. And so when we were able to, as APRNs, have a formulary that was got rid of the 30-some pages, and we just got an exclusionary of one-page formulary, then the physician's assistants needed to have basically the same thing. But in addition to that, then they also prohibited the PA from administering, monitoring, or maintaining any form of anesthesia beyond local anesthesia. And then it also added rapid intubation and procedural sedation because that actually was changed for the advanced practice registered nurses, so the PAs wanted that as well. So that's how that worked out. As far as the references that I used, I just want to say that all of this came directly from the 4723s of the OAC and the ORC. And so these are the current laws and rules that go along for the Board of Nursing. So how that works is that the lawmakers make the laws, and then from the law, then the different boards have an opportunity then to keep them the same or make them more strict. And so therefore, the Board of Nursing would take whatever law that the lawmakers decided, and then they could either adopt it and make it into the rules, or they can make it more strict. And I think that that's when you have some people that make their way down to the Board of Nursing, if that happens, but it can, and that is within their legal right to do so. So that's why you have the separate law and rules, but they do work really hard and make sure that they are pretty well the same. So I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. And now that you've completed the video, then you'll just need to do the post evaluation, take the post quiz, pass it by 80%, and then your certificate will be given to you. So have a great day.